Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sanders, and this is Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection. Today we're going to take a look at Kasper's unique collection, but before I do that, I wanted to introduce you to the company that Kasper has his watches from. And it's one that is not held in the greatest esteem, and the watches they make are fairly what I'll call humble. They're humblers. Okay, we all have some. This is my $200 Chinese watch, and here's my homemade $100 watch I put together. So I mean, it's something, we all have humble watches, and this is a humble collection, but it's very unique. And before we get started, I wanted to tell you a little about Invicta. Now, there's a certain term that will come to people's heads as soon as collectors' heads, as soon as they hear the words Invicta. Instead of that word, instead of something scatological, here's an idea. Try to come up with something. Here's the humble, all right? You got some humble ones too. All right, so let's take a look at, what I wanted to do is a modern Invicta, and take a sample of 3 watches. And they have 4 general movement categories. The biggest one, or one of the biggest ones, is quartz. And so we're not interested in quartz. And there's 2 different kinds of automatics. And then there's 1 kind of mechanical movements, or I should say 1 class of mechanical movements. And they're a Chinese outfit. The movement is JQR005 GILT. Right? It's a mechanical series. China has thousands of watchmaking companies for making mechanical or automatic watches. So they get one of those. All right. The second one for automatics, the one in the middle there, it has a Sellita SW500. Now this is their top drawer movement, and it's a Swiss made, and they're very proud of the fact that is. And this is probably one of their most expensive watches. This one is listed at $10.56. I got all of these, by the way, from the Invicta site, and they're discounted all over the place. Trust me on this one. Finally, the other ones, the really inexpensive ones. Now, this Superman one was 78 bucks. Okay, and it has an automatic movement it's a Japanese company called TMI, and the caliber is called the NH35A. They're very economical, I'll put it that way. Okay, so this is sort of a sample of mechanical and automatic watches that Invicta has today. When they were founded in Chaux de France in Switzerland, they were founded in 1837. What they wanted to do was that they wanted to make Swiss watches that were affordable. Okay, well, they certainly got the affordable part right, and they sell a lot of watches. So that's just sort of an introduction to what we're going to be looking at when we look at Kasper's collection. Now, as a reminder, I had done this little chart. The biggest fish is a Philippe Dufour, and it eats cheap watches. In this case, you have a Patek Philippe, and it eats cheap watches, which is a Rolex, and so on and so forth. So it really doesn't matter what kind of watch you have. There's always going to be some bigger, nicer watch that's going to stick its nose up at some of the watches you have. So let's just look at these as sort of a humble collection that we don't stick our nose up at, lest that happens to our watches. All right, it's just a reminder, there's always going to be somebody who's got more money, better looking, yada, yada, yada. So, okay, so let's start off. Now, Kasper sent me these without a lot of information, but they were so interesting. Now, here's the thing about the ones that he collects. They're pretty much vintage. And so they go back to a time when Invicta was making its own movements, and we'll see some of those in a bit. The first one up in the upper left up there, that has a day date, and it has it's called Invicta 17, and then it's got the small seconds. And it's sort of interesting is that they use green and red sort of little tops on top of the days, the day date. I'm not quite sure why, but at a glance you can tell which is which. The one next to it on the right is just a date only at 3 o'clock. Otherwise, it's called a it's just an automatic. They have, some of them are called rotomatics, and I'm not sure what the difference between a rotomatic and an automatic is. That's how come I was taking a closer look at them. Okay, now the two on the bottom are both described by Invicta as rotomatics, and they're both time only. They look to be pretty close to each other. There's some slight difference. Could just be the lighting, like I said. But there's actually one seems to be a little shinier and a little newer than the other one, but they're pretty much the same watch. And again, like I said, they're both come under the rotomatic. And by the way, too, most of these look like, in fact, all of them are sort of a type of more dressy watch, a dressy looking watch, or an office watch. Now, in this next group, we get into a little newer ones. The one in the upper left there is a chronometer. I mean, not a chronometer, but a chronograph. And it's pretty simple, a working one with the chronograph functions in it. And then at 9 and 3 o'clock, it has subdials for the minutes and the seconds and so forth to use with a chronograph. To the right of it is called, there's an automatic 25. It's another one with date only. And right below it, there's another version of the same watch. As you can see, they both have the date. There's a little difference between the two, but not a great deal. They're just indexes, no numbers on either one of them. Now, the one in the lower left has each one, instead of indexes, they have the numbers, and a little dot next to them. And then at the bottom, it says ankle block, which is a shock absorbing system. All right, this next group now is the one in the upper left has the metal bracelets. In other words, the one in the upper left and the two metal bracelets below that has some kind of connection to 1837. It's probably one of the older ones in Kasper's collection, and it's pretty plain looking style of time only with indexes. Doesn't even have a second hand on it. Now next to it is another day date, but what they also have is the hand date. So you have in the windows up right below 12 o'clock, you have the day, the month, and then the long hand with a little cup on the end or a little crescent on the end is your hand date on it. So that's sort of a cool looking watch. Now on the lower right, you have a very interesting square watch. And it would be a very formal one. I tried it. It looks pretty small there because I wanted to show the band that came with it. It came with some kind of reptile band, and it's a very formal looking watch. This final group are the movements, and these are all Invicta manufactured movements, which is a lot more than you can say for some of the really expensive watches. These movements are, all of them you can see, they all have the Invicta logo on it, which of course we know doesn't mean a great deal sometimes. The one at the top and then the one at the lower right, both of those are mechanical watches. And in the lower left, you have one with a rotor, which is an automatic. So here's the thing, is that the interesting thing about it is that when they survived the quartz crisis, and they did it in two ways. One, they simply adopted quartz movements in a lot of their watches, but they also started using very inexpensive movements from China and Japan, both the mechanical and the rotor. Here though, this is sort of before that, they were able to be very competitive, making their own movements. And they're not expensive movements, they're not especially elaborate, but they're very functional movements. And so this is one of the things, I think it's somewhat of a surprise. A lot of people, Invictas, it's a crummy watches, and they don't even count them. And I think that's a mistake, because unless you know exactly all of the parts, everything that goes into your watch, how many things are different, and why are the things in your watch so much better? Some of you have never even been able to see everything that's on your that's in your watch. I mean, you have these solid backs, and you can't see them, or you have a big rotor over them. Now these you have to take the back off of, but at least you can get a pretty good idea of what's in there. And these are all, like I said, these are some of the other ones that Invicta made. Well, anyway, now I have an idea that what you might think of, say, well, I'm going to tell Kasper how to get this, or something like that. Before you do that, though, take a look at these, take a careful look at them, and really consider it. How would you recommend sort of for a next step for Kasper? You want to do something at a very reasonable price. One of the things that I was thinking of is getting something, either a step up with a vintage watch, like there's a Zaza Lacoutre, just a Lacoutre. Some of those are reasonably priced, or getting one of the more modern ones, such as Tissot, that are lower priced, and they have ETAs and so forth in them, if you're interested in that. Now, I guess the other option for Kasper, unless you go, keep getting more and more vintage Invictas, there's, at that price point, you're not going to be able to get into too many complications. Now, you have the chronograph, which is good, complicated enough. But you might want to think of one watch that that you could wear with in a work environment, or sort of a little nicer office watch. That might be a suggestion too. Anyway, well, listen, I'd like to hear your suggestions, and until next Friday, this is Bill Sanders for Watch Outside, the Art and Science of Watch Collection.